SUVs have been the preferred flavor for the Indian car market for quite some time now, and MG is making the most of it. You see their parents SAIC, they have great connections, and that has given MG access to SUVs of all shapes and sizes. They brought the Baojun 530 to India, rebadged it as the MG Hector, then they followed it up with the elegant ZS EV, then came the Hector Plus, and now it's time for them to add a fourth vehicle to their portfolio. This is the Maxus D90, rebadged for India as the MG Gloster. The MG Gloster looks like nothing else on the road, not even its own siblings, and that can work like a double-edged sword. Some might find it too sober compared to the Hector, while some will appreciate its understated elegance like people did with the ZS EV. There's no chaos of character lines or too much bling. I was worried that for a car so big, MG would overdo the whole bling factor, but thankfully they haven't. The shiny chrome is only down in the bumper, you see it on the door handles. All the other places where people usually just put too much chrome, they've gone with a satin finish or matte chrome like some people like to call it, and I think it looks very tasteful, looks very premium, and that immediately gives this car a very premium poise. Like I said, the grille looks imposing, and with this kind of a finish, it looks like an expensive car. However, I believe that the riveted or diamond pattern grille akin to the Hector Plus would have been more befitting for the Gloster's premium positioning. The headlights are pretty large too, but look closely and you will appreciate the finer details around them, like the metal detailing around the LED lamps, or the kink in the bonnet shut line that interplays with the twin pot arrangement for the lights, or the little extensions that connect the lamps to the grille. These details are bound to stand out in sportier colors though. I'm not very impressed with the LED headlamps though. The layout looks good, but the specification, though it sounds premium and very superior, it doesn't really translate to great illumination on the road. Think of it as those super bright aftermarket headlamps that people put on a lot of cars where they look very bright in the assembly, but on the road it doesn't really translate to very good illumination. The color temperature certainly doesn't work very well for our conditions. It's a little too white, and it doesn't really identify potholes all that easily. Worse in these rainy conditions. And at highway speeds, you get a lot of spread, but you don't get a good enough throw. What you're seeing is literally a few meters ahead of you. And if you have to use the high beam, even that doesn't help much. And in certain scenarios, if you were to just use the flash for 1 second or a couple of seconds, the moment you let go of the stock, it's so flimsy that it judders and the position gets stuck in the high beam position, and you have to then bring it back to the low beam position. And I think that just takes away from the premium feel. Otherwise, yeah, I think they ought to have done a better job with the lighting. What I love about the Gloster's design is just how massive it looks. Think of it as a GLS or a Q7 on a shoestring budget. It even dwarfs a Range Rover Sport. Oh, and speaking of Range Rovers, there's a bit of that inspiration seen here in this vertical applique. And because MG wants to remind you that they are of British origins, there's also a badge that does just that. These little touches add a bit of class to its mammoth size, but once you reach the tailgate, things don't look as classy, save for those tail lights. That Ford diffuser and those 4 exhaust pipes might look good from where you're looking, but then you can also see those 2 exhaust mufflers right behind them, and I don't like the treatment. I also don't like the amount of badges that they've put on the tailgate. There's so many of them. It reminds me of the SsangYong Rexton. I don't think it's done very tastefully either, but I think a lot of people are going to like these badges. Have you seen the number of people putting up the Morris Garage's paste lettering on the bonnet of the Hector? Those kind of people are certainly going to like the number of badges that the car is giving you. But I really hope MG gives you the option to also get a vehicle without all these badges. If I was buying, I would have preferred a subtler Gloster insignia below the rear windshield. But being an MG, it loves to flaunt its tech on its sleeve, or tail in this case, and therefore there are the Internet Inside and the ADAS badges on the boot. Between all the badges on the rear and what they mean for you at the front, there's 3 rows of seating in between. So let's go step by step. Now the third row can obviously, as you can see, be folded down for an enormous luggage space. And remember what I said, a GLS or a Q7 on a shoestring budget, the third row of seating is also one of the reasons for that. So what you can see here is the kind of seating that you get. Of course, once the seats are up, you can always have the backrest to be a little upright like this, or you can recline it a little bit more for better comfort. Now, speaking of comfort, the knee room is fine, but foot space is quite compromised because of the rails for these seats. But then again, these seats are completely retracted back. Once I put them to my seating preference, this is the kind of room that I get. and there is no compromise in the second row. This is the kind of room that I get, so I can always stretch out a little bit more. So in terms of comfort, well, not the most comfortable seating, but in terms of a 3-row or a 3rd-row seating, I think this is quite comfortable. These seats are not the typical jump seats, they are a little bit more supportive than that. So yeah, in terms of seating, I quite like it. And then you have this large aperture for the rear quarter glass, so it's not going to feel claustrophobic in here. The car is obviously quite tall, so you might need to climb into the cabin. You have the footboard for that, you have these handles for that. So irrespective of what your frame size is, getting in and out of this car is not a difficult job. Ingress and egress in that sense is quite good. Now, like I told you, I have set this seat to my preference now, and you can see the kind of knee room I still get, and there's still enough knee room even for the 3rd-row passenger. Foot space, again, quite excellent. I quite like it, but you have to sort of stretch out your feet if you don't want to sit in that knees up position and you want better under thigh support. Now the seats, they may look very similar to what you have in the front row, but they feel a little more supportive. Even the headrests are a little better. So even if you want to just, take a rest, it's really nice. So overall, I like this seating. It feels quite nice. I like this diamond pattern that you get on the seats, feels quite premium. What I also like is the attention to detail. You get a similar diamond knurl pattern even in the lights up here. I like that attention to detail, gives it a nice premium vibe. The overall stitching, the materials, they feel nice to the touch. So yeah, it does feel premium. Now at the same time, you get these AC vents up top. You get all the controls are very easy to get to. You also get a switch gear for the 3-zone climate control, so you can control these vents. Now, people are on the fence on whether this is enough or not. Now, having spent enough time with this car, I can tell you just one vent on top here and one for the 3rd row is actually quite good, because there's also enough space between the seat and the B pillar. So there's a lot of cool air flowing to the back side of the cabin as well. So in terms of the cooling efficiency, there's no complaint at all. I quite like the overall seating space. I like the kind of cooling that I get, and I like that airy feel that I get because the windows are huge, and then you have this big panoramic roof which extends all the way to the back. So yeah, in terms of the airy feel and the comfort, I like the 2nd row. This is in fact going to be the business seat for the Gloster. Both the rows get plenty of storage spaces and charging options too. And no matter what row you're seated in, there is a sense of airiness to this cabin. The moment you get inside the cabin of the Gloster, you are going to be absolutely wowed by the kind of ambience that it creates for this class, for this particular price bracket. That whole premium feel that we are talking about, that constant repetition that I'm making of this being a GLS or a Q7 on a shoestring budget, it all immediately starts making sense the moment you get into the driver's seat. Look at the kind of materials they've used. Soft touch materials on the top. You don't get any forward here. This is leatherette, of course. This is artificial leather, but it feels very nice the way it's staged, the way it's all laid out together. It really feels nice and lifts the whole mood of the cabin. The kind of textures used, the quality of materials, the fit and finish is just hard to falter. Yes, there are some scratchy plastic bits here and there on some of the touch points as well, and that could have been done differently is what I believe, but there's not too much of it. It really gives you a very nice feeling inside this cabin. Now, I do have a few niggles with this cabin, or some things that I'm going to nitpick on. For example, this metal plaque that you see on the seats is just blank. They could have just put the Morris Garage's lettering on that. It would have really looked nice and gone with the vibe of the cabin. Some of the switch gear looks good, but the way they have utilized the spaces here, not the best way to really go about with the space management. For example, the phone, it has a wireless charging pad right here, but then the screen completely goes out of your line of sight, which is a good thing because it's not going to keep disturbing you. But at the same time, there is no wireless Apple CarPlay or wireless Android Auto. You have to use a wired connection. The USB port is right here, and if you use this, you have to keep the phone at a very awkward angle somewhere here, and every time you accelerate, it sort of starts moving, starts rattling, and you don't want that to happen. If you leave it on top, of course, it's going to start flying around here and there. A missed opportunity, they could have given a USB port in here. You could have just left your phone inside here and then had your Apple CarPlay or Android Auto running. So, these are a few missed opportunities here and there. They could have done with better space management is what I believe, and its competition certainly does a better job at that. That said, I've talked about the AC cooling performance. It really feels nice, and taking center stage here on the center console is this big infotainment screen. The AC controls are not a part of the infotainment like we've seen in the Hector. They are physical switches, so that's a very good thing. They're very ergonomically placed and very easy to use. As for the infotainment, it's a 12.3-inch screen, not that big vertical screen that we've seen in the Hector. So this is going to need some convincing because people are going to expect something larger, something bigger. But this does its job really well. Of course, it comes with all the tech that you expect from MG, from that Internet Inside badge. It has connected tech in it. You also get the Gaana app, but again, like the MG Hector, the Gaana app has really tiny font, so reading it is going to be a disaster when you're driving the car. But that again is something that needs getting used to, and if once you're logged in and once you have your own playlist on the Gaana app, I hope that this is going to be easier, or you just ask your co-passenger to do it. Now the volume control are these two little touch buttons on the infotainment itself. Again, very difficult to use. There's no physical volume knob. I would have preferred that, especially when I want to quickly cut the audio or reduce the volume. It takes a little while to do it with these switches, which by the way are very flimsy, or doing it with these touch buttons. Not a big fan of it. The other problem is the moment let's play some music. The moment I put this into reverse, the volume does reduce a bit, which is a very good thing. But if I want to completely turn it off, there's no way to do it, because once you're in the reverse mode, once this camera is up and running, you can't use these volume switches, you can't use the volume switches here, you can't even use the mute button here, which is a bit of a problem in my books. Right, so this is what the cabin is. I think it's a nice place to be in, but there are a few ups and downs to it, and that is the only thing that sort of makes me say that, okay, they could have done a better job. The iSmart connected tech has all the features that you expect from the Internet Inside badge. Remote operations for the locks, windows and sunroof through the phone, pre-cooling functionality for the cabin, geofencing and vehicle tracking, weather information, etc. The bigger news for the Gloster are the Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, or ADAS. These are a compulsion in the European Union now, and even a Suzuki Ignis ships with them. But in India, it is a safety feature set that is restricted to some of the more expensive cars, given its high cost and usage restriction on certain frequencies, thanks to the radar system that it uses. In the Gloster, the ADAS enables features like a lane keep warning, forward collision warning, automated emergency braking, and adaptive cruise control. Now, MG's done a great job with the noise insulation on this car, especially with road noises, tire noises, even the engine noises, and the engine refinement has a big role to play in that. And yet, what breaks the silence of this cabin are all these beeps and warnings and sounds that you get from all around the car. Like for example, you have the blind spot assistant. So the moment there is a vehicle in the blind spot, or any obstruction in the blind spot for that matter, it will give you this subtle warning. Now there's a vehicle coming up. I believe there will be a light on the wing mirror there. So you saw that the vehicle was coming up and there was a blind spot warning, and it's a very subtle warning. Now if I show the indicator indicating that I want to change the lane, and there's another vehicle in there, so there was a blind spot warning and a beep to draw my attention and tell me that there is still something in your blind spot and you shouldn't make that lane change. So I think this is a very good system to have. Now if you look on the screen, you'll have two options here under the lane warnings. So you have the lane departure warning, which is the LDW. You have the LDW plus the LKA, or the lane keep assist. However, if I try to select it, I can't. And that's because the lane keep assist is not available on the India-Spec model. It's only the lane departure warning that you get on the India-Spec model. What you do, however, get as a part of the ADAS is the radar guided cruise control. Now let me show you how it works. You basically start the cruise control using the cruise control switch on the steering wheel. I'm going to set the speed to say 110 kilometers an hour. So you can see my foot is off the accelerator. It is starting to accelerate, but it will not go to 110 despite the speed being set to that. The reason for that is, if you look right in front of me, there's another vehicle in my lane which is maintaining a slower speed than 110 kilometers an hour, and which is why this vehicle, the Gloster, is restricted to a little over 80, about 90 kilometers an hour is what it's maintaining as per the speed of the vehicle in front of me. So this is essentially what adaptive cruise control is all about. So irrespective of what speed you've set, it will essentially keep altering the speed depending on the vehicle in front of you. Now, if I were to change lanes once the lane is empty, it will then again accelerate to the set speed that I have on the cruise control. Now, all the lanes are blocked at the moment. We have 2 more cars coming up. The moment they pass, I'm going to get into the fast lane and let's see if it accelerates on its own.
Left curve ahead.
It will also keep throwing these kind of warnings. So using the GPS, it knows that there's an upcoming left curve. So it's warned me about that. In fact, yesterday it also warned me about rain. So these are times when Bombay has been getting some on and off rain, some thunder showers. And last night thunder showers were expected. And using the weather app, it essentially threw up a warning telling me that a lot of rain is expected later in the evening. So, plan your trip accordingly. And I think that's a very nice feature to have that again shows you what connected tech is all about. Okay, so by the time I'm done telling you that the lane's empty, I'm going to change the lane. Our cruising speed is set to 110. Let's see if the car accelerates. There, it's accelerating on its own. My foot is still off the pedal. There is some traffic up ahead. So once we pull closer to the traffic, it will again start adapting the cruise control speed to the speed of the vehicles in front of me. It's reached 110. I'm not on the brakes. I'm not on the accelerator. It's reached 110. So if the vehicle in front of us doesn't accelerate away, I'm sure this car will start decelerating on its own. There you go. It's starting to drop speed. It's down to 100. Down to almost 90. And that's because we have traffic in front of us. So, well, this is how adaptive cruise control works. And I'm happy to report and show you that it works well in India as well. The Gloster that we've tested in the Savvy trim is the only one from the range to get the ADAS. The other big talking point for this trim is its 2-litre diesel engine, which gets a twin turbo configuration compared to the single turbo induction available in the lower trims. Powering the Gloster is a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel engine, but don't confuse this with the multi-jet unit that already powers cars like the Jeep Compass and MG's own Hector. This is a different engine altogether. This is a twin turbo unit. It puts out 218 PS of power and 480 Newton meters of torque. Now these are impressive figures, of course. These are better than what the competition like Endeavour and Fortuner offer. But at the same time, it's not just these figures that are impressive. It's also the refinement of this diesel engine that is going to set it apart. You'll have to drive it to believe it. It feels like a proper premium engine. It almost feels like it came out of one of the European luxury cars. That is how good this engine is. Now the engine suffers from a fair bit of turbo lag. Under 2000 RPM, there's not much. So especially when you're driving it in the city, the gearbox is quite quick to respond, in fact, at city speeds. In fact, when you slow down for a speed breaker, you know that it's dropped a gear, but the moment you come off the speed breaker, it takes a while to take off again. And that's down to the turbo lag. It's only beyond 2000 RPM that power and torque really starts making itself evident, and that is where the car gets a better roll on acceleration. This engine is mated to an 8-speed automatic, a torque converter. Not the quickest of gearboxes around, but it doesn't leave a lot of room for complaint. It does most of its jobs quite well in the city and also out on the highway. The Gloster brakes impressively for its 2.5 tons of mass. The suspension is tuned on the firmer side too, which means that the Gloster has taut body control despite its body-on-frame construction. And it feels planted at highway speeds too, even if you are not driving with a full house. On rumbler strips or a series of joints typical to the concrete highways in India, the Gloster does feel a bit stiff and tends to skip and squirm. It also has these consistent vibrations or judders through the floorboard while driving on concrete roads, which can get annoying after a while in spite of the cabin being relatively quiet otherwise. On poor roads with slower speeds, the suspension does a fairly better job and soaks up most of the undulations. Now, depending on your driving scenario, depending on your own intent, you can also change different driving modes. So you have the eco and the sport mode. If you don't prefer making any changes there, you can always leave it in auto using this little selector right here. You also have a rock and sand mode. You have a snow and mud mode as well. Now the rock mode is really useful when you're going off the road, because that is also the mode that will give you a low range ratio, something very similar to what we've seen in the automatic transmission of the Jeep Compass Trailhawk. So this is very similar to that, where it will give you a low range ratio for literally just crawling over rocks. So if you're going to take this car off-road, this is going to be quite handy. You also have the snow and the mud modes, like I told you. There's also a sand mode. Now, of course, the tires are something that you will need to upgrade. This comes with road tires or street tires. So this is a kind of car that's not really intended for someone who is going to take it off-road. At the same time, if you do want to take it, there is enough kit in here for you to start exploring, so to say. On our test, the Gloster climbed up and descended a mossy rock trail without any drama from the road tires. Adding more metal to its off-road merit is its 210mm ground clearance, short overhangs, 550mm of water wading capability, and the excellent visibility that it offers all round. The visibility that you get outside of the front windshield is brilliant. It is huge. It just makes it feel like some of the bigger luxury cars like the GLS, the X5, the X7s. You know, it literally feels that tall. You get a nice big commanding view of the road. The aperture is huge. You get a clear view. You can see both the edges of the bonnet. You can see where the edges of the car are. So getting a judgment is not a problem at all. And then you have these massive wing mirrors, which again help you get a judgment of where the rear corners of the car are. So in terms of judgment, in terms of drivability, it's not going to be a big problem. Yes, in tight parking spaces, it does become a bit of an issue because especially the steering, it's not as precise when you're using it in tight parking spaces. You think you've got a full turn on it and you really haven't. You haven't got the exact same angle that you expect in your head that you might have got with the wheels when you're turning the steering wheel in a certain manner. But it's just a matter of getting used to. The learning curve is not too big. It's the same thing that you get with most large cars of this size. And once you get used to it, you realize that despite its size, the Gloster is actually not that difficult to maneuver even in tight spaces. And that's a very good thing. There's also a 360-degree camera and an automated parking assist to make maneuvering and parking quite easy. So to sum it up, if you are stepping up from a compact SUV, the Gloster has plenty to keep you entertained. While the ADAS features and the connected technology do push up the price by quite a bit, the lower trims take on the natural rivals like the Ford Endeavour and the Toyota Fortuner and pose to be the more value-for-money alternatives. The Gloster then is aimed at those seeking a comfortable 3-row SUV that has the poise and the appointments of a luxury SUV but at the price of an entry-spec luxury compact. And that combination should, in theory, work in its favor. Do you think the Gloster will break into the armor of the Endeavour and Fortuner though? Or will it join the ranks of countless other SUVs that have failed to make a mark? Let us know your thoughts. Also tell me, what do you think is the standout feature for the Gloster that everyone will talk about? And once you're done giving us your feedback, don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family. Thank you so much for watching.